heard a song this week that I'd never heard before. Now, I should have heard it because it came out mid-2000s. But see, 2001 is when I was ordained, and I was busy trying to figure out how to be a pastor through the 2000s. And so I wasn't listening to music as well as I should have. And that's when Audio Slave was singing, and they sang all kinds of songs, and one of their songs was called Show Me How to Live. And in that song they asked this question: is this a cure or is this a disease? Isn't that an interesting question? Is this a cure or is this a disease? So in the light of that, I have a public service announcement for you. It's brought to you by Hans Fine. He's a Lutheran pastor and journalist, and he wanted you liberals to understand the shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas. Here's what he says. It was part of God's plan that over 24 people would get shot up while in their own house of worship. It may seem on the surface that God was refusing to give such protection to his Texan children, but we are also praying that God would deliver us from evil eternally. Through these same words, we are asking God to deliver us out of this evil world and into his heavenly glory, where no violence, persecution, cruelty, or hatred will ever afflict us again. Fine then says, in order to fully defeat evil eternally, God has to let evil get some temporary victories, such as this weekend's mass shootings. Is it a cure or is it a disease? We get so caught up in something that we see in front of us. We get so caught up in this vision over here that it's hard for us to hear beyond that. And it's easy to hear when someone else does that. It's harder to hear and see and react when we do it ourselves. It's easy to see when Mary and Joseph and Senator-to-be Roy Moore get mixed up, to see the disease in that. It's harder to see it in ourselves. And one of the gifts that life gives to us is other voices. That when we're so consumed with something over here, call to us and say, have you seen this other thing? Have you looked in this other direction? I don't know about you, but I don't always like that voice. For example, my dad's voice says, son, are you sure you want to do that? And it calls me away from whatever is consuming me, whatever is taking my attention, whatever is drawing me one direction, and says, look somewhere else. Dad's been dead over 20 years now, but his voice sounds just as strong in my ears. Don't you have people like that who keep speaking, who keep living, who keep being in such a way that you can't ignore them even now? In the movie Beginners, one of the characters, Anna, points out across a little valley and looks at some lights down below and it says, people like us live there. Half believe it will never work out. The other half believe in magic. It's like a war between them. I think what our saints tell us to do is to believe in magic in this moment. Because moments of life, especially the challenging, difficult moments, take our vision so much that we believe that they're the truth. And our saints tell us, no, there's a magic beyond that darkness. And even in those mundane, wonderful moments that we like living in, where we just get caught up in the comfort and the ease and whatever's normal and typical, our saints call us to see something more. To believe that it's not just normal and typical, but that God has something beyond that for us. And they call out to us and ask us to see more. They ask us to look at possibilities we haven't considered yet. Saints lovingly and sometimes forcefully open our eyes. Saints sometimes even even in their errors and what it is that they do wrong or quirkily or in ways that we're not ready for, open our hearts to see beyond ourself. Paul Torin has said, death is only a horizon, and a horizon is nothing more than the limit of our sight. And those people who continue to live, literally live in us, not as a remembrance only, but in some very real way, call us to see beyond the horizon. And you know the only way you can see beyond a horizon is to walk towards that horizon. And they call us to put our footsteps forward so that we see something we haven't seen, to walk past that barrier and out of that darkness and to become something we haven't seen. But we must be willing to sing like Audio Slate sang, show me how to live. Because I might be unusual in this, but I didn't always make the best choices. And I needed someone to help me, to show me, to love me enough to help me see beyond whatever was right there in front of me, whatever was consuming my attention, whatever had me bound in that moment to whatever course of action I was in, and to see more. Revelation talks about it as a new heaven and a new earth that come down. And that's really important, because it's not God sitting up there saying, hey, here's the right way to do things. It's God coming down and living in someone. Living among mortals. And somehow speaking out of that space of life. And saying, here's a new way of looking. Here's a new way of seeing. Here's a new way of being. And you've heard that voice of God, haven't you? You might have thought it was your mom, or your Aunt Millie, or that teacher, or that boss, or whoever it happened to be. You might have thought it was just them, but it was really and truly Spirit speaking in them and through them. God has spoken to me in so many people, helped me in so many different ways. I want to just share one. Her name is Joanne. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't here. You might have noticed. I've heard the celebration. Because I was down celebrating Joanne. Joanne was in her 90s, and I spent probably about as much time beside her sickbed as with anybody ever. I sat a long time with her as she went through all these different struggles, all these different things that aging bodies do to you. And we had an affinity with each other because we were both first-grade teachers. But I had only boys growing up, and she had only girls, not just in the first generation, but in the second generation below her and the third generation. She has only girls. And so I think she looked at me and said, here's a boy I can fix. And she did it in the most wondrous way. I'd stand up there and say all kinds of things, and then she'd come up to me afterwards and say like 2 words. And I'd have to go, oh my gosh, let me think about that. And she lovingly and carefully drew me beyond just myself. And so I needed to be there, to be able to celebrate the ongoing voice that is Joanne in my heart and in my life. That voice that showed me something more. And we all need saints like that, but for each of us the saint is very different. For each of us the voice is very different. And it speaks individually to the space where we're at right in that moment. Naomi Shahid Nye wrote this: the river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous, however briefly, to the cheek. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is only famous to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. You see, most of your saints aren't going to be remembered by most of the people in the world, are they? But they remain a bright light in your life, one that you remember because they chose to be present for you in some way. And where we find ourselves with our saints is a mixture of I miss you and yet I don't, because you're present still, inexplicably. Those candles that we light aren't for people that are gone from our lives, but for people who somehow remain present and active and here with us. We lose the body in that moment called death, but the person never quite goes away, even when they say those challenging things. Even when they draw us beyond ourselves, maybe especially not in those moments. But we have to open ourselves and be ready for the challenge of listening to them, because they will always draw us beyond. 100 years ago this week, Friday was the anniversary. 33 women were carried into captivity from the evil space called the front yard of the White House. They've been marching out in front of the White House for weeks. They were marching in order to get the right to vote. And on this day, this black day, they were carried into jails. They were beaten and abused. They were, when they had to go to the restroom, someone followed them, usually a man, because that's who the guards were, and watched them the whole time. They were given rancid food to eat. And when these saints were released from that prison, and when they were told they could go home, you know where they went? Back in front of the White House and picked up their signs. And because they sat there in that courageous spot of being a saint, and they heard the voices that had gone before them, and a couple of years after that, the 19th Amendment was passed. And today we have courageous women who are every single day able to vote, able to be voted for. Did you see the elections and see how many amazing women were elected? This is the future of what's going to change things, because those saints lived, we have things. Because those saints lived courageously and fearlessly, and it called us to do the same. Because you see, that's the ultimate of this all saints thing. These saints don't want you to just remember them. If that's all they do, then we fail. They want who they were to become part of who we are. They want the courage that they showed to infuse us with courage. They want the energy that they gave to become part of our energy. They want their vision to open up our eyes to something more. They want us to become saints in this world. And you know why? Because there's still a lot of challenge. There's still a lot of darkness. There's still a lot of things like Sutherland Springs, Texas, that happen. And there's a lot of people that need someone to speak a word that will give light in that moment. There's a lot of people that need someone to give just a bit of strength or a bit of vision. They need someone else to help them to see and become. We unite with the spirit of our loved ones through prayer and silence if we reach out to the author of love. And even as they became part of that love flowing in the world, they call us to be part of that love as well. I'm almost ready to admit that I'm not going to have everything perfectly fixed by the time I pass on to that yet larger room. And my vision has to somehow reach out to those who are going to have to fix and change and become. God doesn't want us to just honor saints. God wants us to become saints in this world. And our world right now needs us, our presence, our spirits, our activism, needs us to do something so this world can be changed once again. There's a song that we sang all the time growing up, and you don't have to like the whole song or all the theology that I had from my background, but the song was this, and every little Mormon kid knew this. The Spirit of God, like a fire, is burning. You see, we have to believe that that Spirit of God is burning, not just in us, but in all those other people around us. We have to see that Spirit of God burning, and we have to remind each other about that Spirit burning, because when you're in this midst of some place that is dark or challenging or difficult, that's not what you see. We have to hold up these candles of our saints and the candle of the Spirit of God within us to be able to tell each other, God still is alive. God still is active. And there's a chance that today another miracle can happen. Courage profound and grace-filled ministries used by the saints to weave faith tapestry and generate